America is trying to play empire. The government is lying to you. We need to get back to focusing on ourselves. These agencies became more powerful than the government itself.
End all of these wars.
Welcome to the Quest for Clarity podcast. Here is your host, Nolan.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Quest for Clarity podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Nolan Denaro. I really appreciate you guys stopping by and watching another episode. And we have a very interesting episode for you today. We got to cover two foreign conflicts. We're going to start off talking about the latest and maybe some potential breakthroughs in the Russia-Ukraine war. We may have a Trump-Putin summit, and potentially Zelensky will join along with that. We will see. We'll get into that to start off. And later on in the show, we're going to cover the latest on Israel and their influence here in the United States, which is pretty upsetting and disgusting once we take a look at it. We had an AIPAC-funded Republican congressional trip over this week, so we'll get into that and the disgusting implications it has within our Congress. But we'll start off in Russia, in the European sphere. So yesterday, Donald Trump announced that during the meeting between Steve Witkoff and Vladimir Putin, there was announced the potential of a summit between Trump and Putin, an in-person summit for the first time this term. Now, at first it seemed like this was maybe going to happen, maybe not. Trump kind of implied like this is what we want to happen. There was kind of a light agreement maybe that this was something that both sides would be interested in. But just today, the Kremlin announced that Vladimir Putin and Americans have agreed to this, and it will likely come in the next few days. So we are very possibly going to see a meeting now between the Americans and the Russians to discuss potentially ending the war in Ukraine over the next few days. So today, the Kremlin, quote, says that the meeting was, quote, agreed to. So what does this mean? It's important to understand the state of the current war. So right now, Russia is winning the war. Right now, Russia has taken multiple different provinces in eastern Ukraine, and there's been lots of death, and there's ongoing death every single day. And Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, is being hit very hard on a daily basis with different missiles and strikes. And Russia is kind of slowly chipping away. Not as much as they would have thought at the beginning of the war, but Russia is slowly chipping away at Ukraine. And Ukraine is losing men, a lot of men. Ukraine is really down. There was reports yesterday, I believe, or the day before, of Ukrainians are now allowing 60-plus-year-olds to join the front lines. So it's really a bad situation for Ukraine, and Russia is definitely in the position of power in this war. So this is why I'm a little bit skeptical of these potential talks between Trump and Putin, because Putin is really in no position to be wanting to end this war. If things were to continue right now, in America, if everything was to stay the same, all the different factors, the amount of American support, amount of European support, the current trends right now in terms of men for Ukraine, and the state of the Russian offensive, Russia would eventually most likely win if everything was to stay as exactly it is right now. So that is why I'm a little bit concerned, because Putin right now has not. Let's go through what Trump's strategy's been over the second term. Putin has not given an inch throughout all of it, keep in mind. But Trump started off, you'll remember, at the start of this term, he started off very harsh towards Zelensky, which was kind of feeding off the energy that got him elected. A lot of the base, a lot of the Republican Party, not the establishment Republicans like Mike Johnson or any of them, or Mitch McConnell or Lindsey Graham, not really any of them, but a lot of the base of the Republican Party, the populist wing, had a dislike for Volodymyr Zelensky. And that was largely because they felt like this war was dragging on, and he had been responsible for sucking the United States into it to a greater extent than many, including myself, feel we should be involved. Now, feeding off of that energy, Donald Trump started off the term with what you'll remember, the Oval Office screaming match between Zelensky, J.D. Vance, and Donald Trump. Donald Trump even called him a dictator. He said that Zelensky started the war. He was very harsh in his rhetoric towards Zelensky. And this was most likely in an attempt to bring Putin to the table and be friendly towards Putin. That didn't work. Vladimir Putin was not willing to budge. So, in the last couple months, really, Donald Trump has shifted his strategy. He's become increasingly harsh against Putin. And we saw him get more aggressive in different ways. We saw him send more Patriot defense missiles to Ukraine just about a month back. We covered it here on the show. He continues to arm and fund the conflict alongside our Congress. And just the other day, there was the reports that we had repositioned 2 nuclear submarines in response to Russian rhetoric. So we have changed our tone towards the Russians over the past roughly month and a half, most likely. And it also hasn't really worked. We've gotten nothing changed, no physical changes in this war, no rhetorical changes in the war from the Russian side. But now there's the potential of a breakthrough. I don't know how much I trust it, though. So yeah, Witkoff had his meeting this week, and from the initial reports right after the meeting, there was no real breakthrough. But it seemed, according to the American side of the negotiations, that Putin was willing to meet. Now, whether that was the Americans asking for the meeting or Putin asking for the meeting, both sides kind of have their own interpretations of that. The Americans say Putin wants it, and Putin says the Americans want it. So, go with who you think there. But based on the facts on the ground, it seems more like the Americans would want this than Putin would be willing to have this. But regardless, the reason I'm not exactly feeling optimistic about this meeting is because Putin, if you were in Putin's position right now, with the control over the battle that you do, with the land you've taken, would you be willing to really negotiate? Especially if ceasefire. Think about a ceasefire. If you're in Putin's position where you're ahead by such a good amount, would you want to have like a 30-day ceasefire or a 60-day ceasefire to give your enemy a time to regroup? Not necessarily. And none of this is me saying that this is the best case scenario. This is the worst case scenario, specifically for the people of Ukraine. And none of this is really, there's some of it that is Trump's fault. Mostly Trump term 1. But most of this is not in Donald Trump's, none of this is, Donald Trump is kind of acting with the facts on the ground here. Because he has to react in response to how Biden initially responded to this when the war broke out. But a lot of this was out of his control by 30 years, because this has been going on. This conflict about Ukraine, about NATO versus Russia, has really started back in the unipolar moment after the Soviet Union fell, and then really began with NATO expansion in the 90s with Bill Clinton. It continued with different talks without any backing from NATO of Ukraine joining NATO. There was decades of talks about Ukraine joining NATO at some point without any real harsh backing from NATO, real willingness to do it, to go through with it regardless of the response from Russia. They were always kind of poking and prodding at the possibility. And then, of course, we have the Euromaidan revolution in 2014 we've discussed before with heavy U.S. and CIA and European Union implications in that overthrow of the Yanukovych government in Ukraine. And then we also have the annexation of Crimea. Then we have Donald Trump supplying them with Javelin missiles. Then we have Joe Biden kind of taking the globalist, most harsh posturing that you could really imagine towards Russia, and kind of joining the Macrons and the Boris Johnsons of the world at the start of this war and saying, we will stand up for Ukraine no matter what. So there's a long line of succession here. There's a long line of leaders in the post-Soviet era in the West really not doing the right thing when it comes to relations to Russia, when it comes to NATO relations to Russia, and when it comes to the treating, they've essentially, the people who are worse off because of this, the worst scenario is the Ukrainian people. Because they have been told by NATO this whole time that we have your back. They've been kind of giving them emotional support, financial support, and to a certain degree military support throughout their entire history against Russia, but have never actually been willing to step up to the task of defending them when push comes to shove and Russia invades in 2022. And the worst off because of this is the Ukrainians, but it's also the United States. This is the United States and NATO's fault, largely. Because while I agree that Ukraine is not an existential interest to the United States, and we should have nothing to do with whether they are aligned with Russia or NATO, we should not have been posturing for 30 years as if it was a big interest, and then when push comes to shove, not back it up. So there's kind of there's blame to put on pretty much everybody for the past 30 years. It's been a long line of just continued failure when it comes to this specific conflict. And my solution, which is different from other Republicans and different conservative solutions, is I think at this point, unfortunately for United States interests, because I've said it before and I'll say it again, I'm America first. I want what's in America's interests. I think that the United States, as unfortunate as it is, should back out of involvement in this conflict. And I can certainly hear the other side where they lay out the exact thing I just laid out of how the United States has really done Ukraine pretty bad over the last 30 years, and then say that the United States should be arming Ukraine because of that. I can hear that, and I understand that, and I have sympathy for that argument. But when it comes to what's purely right now in the United States' best interests, I really don't think it's in our interest to be poking and prodding with a nuclear power the size of Russia. And I've heard different arguments say that will have bad implications for China and Taiwan, and that if the United States backs out of this, then China with Taiwan, they'll take the opportunity now, because if their axis of the world, the Russia-China axis, was willing to outpower NATO and the United States in this war in Ukraine and Russia, then what's to stop China from just taking Taiwan? I hear that argument. But my argument is that the United States should not be in a position to be the policeman of the world and stop invasions of Ukraine or Taiwan. That's not in the interest of the American people. If China was today to go invade Taiwan right now, what realistically can the United States do to stop it? Just someone answer me that. That's a genuine question. Because from what I know, I don't know if there's anything realistically. Like, if the United States decided to want to take Toronto, could China really do anything to stop us from doing that? No, not realistically. So, if there's something I'm missing here, please feel free to correct me in the comments section, but I really don't think the United States is in any position to be playing world empire and determining the borders of Europe and Asia. Like, really. So, that's where I'll leave it for that subject. That's the current state of negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Now let's get into the latest on the Republican Congress's trip to Israel. The Republican congressman's trip to Israel, which was entirely funded by AIPAC. So over this past week, the House has been on recess, and the Republicans in the House, led by Speaker Mike Johnson, decided to take a propaganda trip entirely funded by AIPAC, which everyone who doesn't know is American Israeli Public Affairs Committee. And they funded this trip for Republican congressmen to go to Israel, go on their propaganda tour, and literally sit in the classroom like little school children and be lectured by Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders about how righteous the cause is of what Israel's doing in Gaza. So let's start off here this is Mike Johnson's video. This kind of was like this is the first video he sent out from Israel. Here, take a look at what Mike Johnson has to say.
Recognizing the destruction of the two temples and two times in history. But it is such a moving time for us to be here at the Wailing Wall. We've offered our prayers. We put our notes into the wall as is traditional. And we're so moved by the hospitality of the people and the great love of Israel. Our prayer is that America will always stand with Israel, and that we will we pray for the preservation and the peace of Jerusalem. That's what Scripture tells us to do. It's a matter of faith for us and a commitment that we have. God bless you.
So Mike Johnson on the ground in Israel, when he actually told, there was I forget the influencer's name. I forget who it was, but there was an influencer on X, or a MAGA influencer, who said that they spoke to Mike Johnson, and Mike Johnson told him that he was going to be spending the congressional recess in his home district. I didn't realize that was Israel, so yes, Mike Johnson and the rest of the congressional Republicans in Israel, amidst the ongoing ethnic cleansing, the ongoing planning of an occupation of the Gaza Strip, and it's hilarious. And this gives me some hope about the future, at least, of this relationship, of this allyship between America and Israel. Their tricks really don't seem to be working anymore. Everybody sees through this. I mean, you have the most conservative influencers, the most conservative of the conservative influencers, on X and on Instagram really going hard against these guys and saying, how out of touch do you have to be? Israel's approval amongst Republicans, Democrats, Independents, almost all age ranges is as lowest in history. And you have the House congressional Republicans just going willy-nilly on their House recess to Israel and making it known. They're not hiding it. They're making it known that this is entirely funded by AIPAC, which has become the buzzword of the day. So I don't know who's behind the PR of the House GOP, but they need to be fired yesterday, because what is this? Who told them it was a good idea to go to Israel, of all places, on this break and make it known that it was funded by AIPAC, which people on the right and the left now do not like. And then, of course, you have Representative from Florida, Randy Fine, who's been a frequent target of mine and many others because of his ridiculously bombastic support for Israel. That's just cartoonish at this point. It's over the top. And it's like, just quite frankly, unacceptable for any member of the United States Congress to be so clearly more supportive and makes more time to talk about a foreign government and foreign country and gives more praise to a foreign country than his own country. It's absolutely insane. Like, you should go look at his Twitter timeline. Literally, I think almost probably more of his tweets have been focused on Israel than the United States. It's like at least half. So it's just this. So this guy takes a picture. Randy Fine takes a picture with Bezalel Smotrich, who is the Israeli finance minister, who just go watch any speech from Bezalel Smotrich over the past 2 years since October 7th. I mean, this is the guy who bragged that not 1 ounce of grain would get into Gaza. This is the guy that is openly abdicating in all of his statements for an ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip so that Israel can just take the Gaza Strip. I mean, him along with Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is the national security minister, they are just the two most radical members of the Israeli cabinet, of Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet. They're so insanely radical. Like Ben-Gvir, the other day, when there was reports of Israelis spitting on Christian Palestinians in the West Bank, he said, "Oh, that's just part of our tradition." What? It's part of your tradition to spit on people? And this is just one of those classic propaganda tours that AIPAC takes all the Republican senators, congressmen. They take them all on. We had Thomas Massey just a couple months ago. He went on Tucker Carlson. He went on Theo Vaughn. He went on all these podcasts and just kind of like exposed the whole game here. Right when a Republican congressman gets elected, they get offered to go on an all-expense-paid trip to Israel to what he describes as the propaganda tour, get you all geared up to dedicate your time in Congress to defending the state of Israel. Like, just anyone reasonable can realize how insane it is. And just please look past the 50-plus years of propaganda behind this. It's so insane and unreasonable to have our leaders, the people, the U.S. representatives, U.S. senators, going and prioritizing spending time in Israel over spending time in their home district, and vote and spending more time tweeting about Israel than about their own country. It's insane. Like it's absolutely insane. No one can defend that. It makes no sense. It just on its face makes no sense that a U.S. representative seems to have more good things to say about Israel than about his own country or his own district or the people that voted him into office. They have more to say about the people that funded the campaigns. This should make everyone realize, not just this, but of course other interest groups as well. These politicians don't have anything. They don't represent you. These politicians don't represent you. They are not U.S. politicians. They are not U.S. representatives. They represent the donor class. They represent the foreign donations they get from Israel and other countries. That's what bases their votes. Because just simply the fact that there was a Gallup poll the other day, I believe about a week ago, that showed 8% of Democrat voters support Israel at this point. 90% of Democrat senators vote to send funding to Israel in the last aid package in Congress. Like, wake up, people. Our Congress is bought and paid for by the lobbyists. They don't represent you, because if they did, the ratios wouldn't be so completely insane to where none of the voters want something, but all the politicians want something. That on its face makes no sense. And you should be asking questions about that and looking into why that is, because the lobbyists have the control in Washington. They always have, and until we do something about it, they always will. So that's where I think I'll end it off today. Two very different conflicts, but very important to keep covering here on the show. I will continue to cover them as long as they last, which I'm not confident that either of them will be ending soon. So, hey, more things to talk about here on the show. So, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please be sure to follow me on Instagram, X, Spotify. Be sure to like and subscribe here on YouTube to always stay up to date on the latest in the news. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching today. Have a good one.